important, according to the story, to go from 5 to 10 in reasonable time. Now, the master said in response to these numbers, good job, well done. And to this servant he said, what happened? That servant said, I turned 2 into 4. Now, would you find that significant, turning 2 into 4? I think it is. Key phrase, life is a numbers game. Part of life is a numbers game. How many books should you read to be adequately prepared to debate the major life issues in the next 10 years? Do you think it's important to come up with a pretty good reasonable number of books in a wide variety of subjects to be adequately prepared to debate the major life issues in the next 10 years? The answer is of course. Now, wouldn't it be important to know about what the number of those books are and what the wide range of major life topics are? This is very important stuff. This is not get-by stuff now. Right? You can get a crust of bread and a pair of shoes and stay out of the rain and do okay, but this is called higher learning for success and leadership and influence and skills that serve well for the future. So it's very important, numbers. How many pounds overweight should you be at age 50? Approximately. About none. Well, we may let you borrow 1 or 2, but 5 and we say, hey, 10 and we say, hey, hey. 15 and we say, hold it. 20 and we turn on the red lights and the sirens. Right. You can't go beyond 20 with any reasonable amount of safety for your health and your future. So numbers are very important. When a reasonable time has passed to say, let's go over the numbers one more time to make sure we're not off track. Everything by longevity tends to drift off track. So we have to keep coming back, what we call mid-course corrections. If you're headed for the moon, the early guidance system when you first blast off doesn't serve for the whole trip. You got mid-course corrections. And they're very important when you're headed for the moon. Right. Because you can miss Kansas City and hit St. Louis and you're all right, but you can't miss the moon, right? So, results being the name of the game, when reasonable time has passed, we have got to, among reason-thinking people, to check out your numbers. Okay? And whatever these numbers may represent in skills or learning or capacity or equities of mind, 5 to 10, 2 to 4. The master said to this servant, I gave you 1 talent. What happened? That servant said, I've still got the same talent. And the story said, the master lost his cool. Or something like that. We call that proper response to lack of results. We must show that the insidious is insidious. We must show how empty life can be without measurable progress. We must get right on the problems and the challenges, lest we yield too easy to the things that can leave our lives empty instead of full and leave us with pennies instead of fortune. We must have proper response to lack of results. Jesus said to his disciples one day, does that fig tree have any figs? Is that an important life question? Does the fig tree have any figs? That's such an important life question, if it's a fig tree. His disciples said, no, sir, that tree doesn't have any figs. The story said Jesus lost his cool. One of the few times he lost his cool. We call that proper response to lack of results. Shouldn't we pour it on? Lack of results? Shouldn't we make it clear? Shouldn't we become emotional? Shouldn't we become philosophically strong and find and select powerful words that will illustrate the point? Lack of results? Right? So, I guess the moral to the story is fig trees better have figs, especially when the maker of the fig tree comes by. Results is the name of the game. I'm teaching kids now how to be rich by age 40. If you live in America with banks and capital and money and churches and sermons and libraries and books and teaching and training and classes and rallies and inspiration, shouldn't you be rich by age 40? If you're not, isn't something wrong? The word isn't right, the word's wrong. Something's wrong. Now, there's nothing wrong with the country. And there's nothing wrong with the community, and there's nothing wrong with the library and the books, and there's nothing wrong with the churches and the sermons, and there's nothing wrong with the school and the teachers, and there's nothing wrong with what's happening, and there's nothing wrong with you, but there's something wrong with your philosophy. Somebody sold you the wrong plan. Wow, it's easy to buy the wrong plan, buy the wrong philosophy, and make errors in judgment that compound into pennies instead of treasure. So, one of the major reasons for looking at results is to see what might be wrong with activity. Maybe it's activity that's producing poor results. Now, a lot of people are working hard, but they're not making much progress. Here's what we teach in leadership skills. Don't mistake movement for achievement. Boy, it's easy to get faked out by being busy. The key is not just being busy. The key is doing what? It's easy to be busy and be making figure eights instead of much progress. So, we look at results to see if there may be some difficulty with activity. Here's where we may need to go to work, activity. Because it takes activity to bring enterprise into being. There's a whole study here on activity. Activity is like birth pains. Disciplined activity is like birth pains. Now, I'm short on experience here, but I'm sure the mothers in the room would tell us, it ain't easy. But see, it wasn't meant to be easy. Values were meant to be costly. The only way we can appreciate a value is by its cost. If it doesn't cost much, we probably wouldn't call it valuable. True winning is a great worth. But the price is to play with all your heart and mind. And perhaps do some losing sometimes so that when you do win, boy, the worth and the value of the winning now becomes a high appreciation. Simply because now we understand both sides of this equation, price and promise. So we take a look at activity, and as we look at results, maybe something's wrong with attitude. Maybe it's how we feel. Maybe we've been nudged off course by influence into how we think about society and how we think about taxes and government and how we think about churches and sermons and people and schooling and learning and classes and worth and value and community and ideology. Our feelings about all that. Then if the results aren't there, one of the major places to look is philosophy. Where have I missed in the refinement of my thinking? Because my thinking has brought me here. Maybe I need some changes in my thoughts, my thinking, the books, the classes, the lessons, the studies, the decision-making, errors in judgment. If I went back and corrected some errors in judgment, do you think that would affect the next 3 years? The answer is, of course. The new equity would be astounding. The new treasure would be exciting simply by making some corrections in philosophy. So we take a great deal of time to look at results, to check errors here, and errors here. All right, here's number 5, and I'm sure you've guessed already what number 5 is. Lifestyle. Lifestyle is simply how you choose to live, how you design your life. It's key to understand. Some people have learned to earn well, but they haven't learned to live well. The man studied economics, but he didn't study lifestyle. Or he's got the money now, but he doesn't have the joy. Here's what lifestyle is. Figuring ways to live uniquely. And it's a study, it's a practice, it's an art. It's as much of a skill as economics, learning to live well, finding ways to bring joy, pleasure, excitement, appreciation, and awareness of how unique life can be. It's a study, it's a practice. It doesn't come by accident. Happiness is not an accident, it's an art. Lifestyle is not an amount. Culture is not an amount. Sophistication is not an account. Sophistication is a practice. It's an art. And anybody who wishes can engage in the art of sophistication. Understanding the difference between trinkets and treasures. Lifestyle. Words and phrases and sentences to communicate with other people. Here's where part of the fortune lies. The use of language. There's magic in good communications. There's magic in the human touch of words. It was said the pen is mightier than the sword. That's true. Words are powerful. Words are almost godlike. I'm an amateur on some of these studies, but an ancient verse says, God was the Word, and the Word was God. Wow, powerful language to illustrate how powerful the Word is. Words can be life-changing. Words can give life. Words can formulate ideologies, democracy and freedom and capitalism and all the things we enjoy in this unique country. We have to find ways to give words to that so that it can be understood. Words form the pictures of our minds. Words help to translate an interchange of thought and ideas between human beings. So one of the most important skills is the skill of good communication. Learning words, phrases, sentences, whether it's written or spoken. Language is so powerful in affecting our lives and using those skills to affect other people's lives. So let's talk about communications and how powerful it is and how important it is. I've got 4 steps to achieve good communications. Let me give you this. Let's dive right into it. And I'm sure if you were to just ponder for a while, you'd probably come up with these same 4 steps. I'm not covering anything new. Right? These are just basic fundamentals. But here's where it all starts. Fundamentals. Somebody once said, being successful is not doing extraordinary things. Being successful is simply doing ordinary things extraordinarily well. So let's talk about some fairly ordinary things. See if we can't find an extraordinary way to put it into action. 4 steps to achieve good communications. Number 1, have something good to say. Right, that's obvious. Success is a study of the obvious, a refined study. So to achieve good communications, first of all, you've got to have something. In computer language, it's very simple. Nothing in, nothing out. You cannot speak that which you do not know. You can't share what you don't feel, and you can't translate what you don't have, and you can't give what you don't possess. So first of all, to give it, to share it, for it to be effective, you got to have it. So good communications, first of all, starts with preparation. Key word. Preparation is simply getting ready. And a big share of our life is simply getting ready, getting ready. That first 5 years was to get ready to start our formal education. The next 8 years. 8 years is a chunk of time, right? But after 8 years now, you're ready for high school. That's a long time. 5 years and then 8 more years. That's a long time to get ready. So now we go through 4 years of high school. And all those 4 laborious years are to get ready for college. Now another 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, 6 more years to get ready, right? To be gainfully employed and earn a living and get out there in the marketplace and see what we can do. A lot of life is just simply getting ready, preparation. Now, to get ready for good communications, you got to spend part of your year, part of your day, getting ready for the next day, part of the week getting ready for the next week. It's so easy to be casual about not continually preparing for the next day, the next week, the next month, the next year. Getting ready. And this is one of the most important areas to get ready in. Good communications. Key word, research, continual research. It's easy to hope that the skills that you learned in the 70s will last through the 80s. Or the information you gathered during the 70s will be sufficient for the 80s, but not so. We've got to continually learn, continually grow. So key word, research, preparation, getting ready. Preparation is like building an account from which to draw. When you get ready to talk, you want to make sure you've got a verbal check that'll cash. Here's the power in good communication. When what you say is only the tip of the iceberg of all you know, that's when communications becomes powerful. When what you say is only a portion of all that you know because you've gotten ready for this moment, this time, this occasion. I'm sure we've all been around some people who very quickly told us more than they knew. Didn't take them but a short period of time to run out of illustrations, to exhaust all their stories, probably meaning great lack of preparation, great lack of deliberately getting ready. Now, it is possible in some respects to prepare for life just by accident. You know, life does teach us some things by accident. There are some things you can learn by just careening from wall to wall and stumbling from day to day and staggering from week to week. I mean, you can learn some things that way. But the other 99% of what you need to know has got to be on purpose. Preparation on purpose. Good phrase. Am I engaged in preparation on purpose to get me ready to do in communication the skills that are necessary to take me where I want to go? Good question. And that's what we're here for, to ask some of the tough questions. When I met Mr. Schoaf, he asked me the tough questions. I'm 25 years old. He said, Mr. Rohn, you've been working 6 years. I started working when I was 19. Mr. Schoaf asked me a simple question. He said, Mr. Rohn, how are you doing? I said, not very well. Mr. Schoaf said, I suggest you not do that anymore. Wow, tough questions. Mr. Schoaf said, Mr. Rohn, how much money have you invested in the last 6 years? I said, what do you suppose, roughly? Not any. Schoaf said, who sold you on that plan? Wow, tough questions, tough questions. And it's so important for somebody to come along and ask us the tough questions and not let us get by with small numbers and small answers. So that's what I'd like to do, ask some of the tough questions. Let me give you now some key words that'll help us to prepare for good communications. Key words. Number one, interest. To prepare for good communications, take a new interest in life. Here's a good pledge to make at the beginning of the day. I'm going to be more interested in this day. I'm going to see if I can get more from the day. Boy, it's easy if you're not careful to just try to get through the day. But sophisticated people learn to get from the day. They don't want a day to go by without gathering up some new ideas, some new impressions, new color, new nuances, new sense of worth and value. They gather from the day, interest. And here's two of the major subjects to study with interest, life and people. Develop a new, sharper interest, new, sharper focus on life and people. What's happening, what's going on. Now, that new commitment to a new interest for the day will get you ready for the years to come with better communications. Because to say it well, you have to feel it well. To say it well, you have to know it. And to know it, you just got to go through the laborious process of gathering, extracting the information. So that's the first word, interest. Here's the second word, fascination. A bit beyond just simple interest. Interested people are probably satisfied that it ticks. It ticks. And that's good to know. It ticks. But fascinated people want to know what? What makes it tick? Fascinated people aren't satisfied usually with surface information. They've got to know more than just what appears. What's really going on? The hippies had a pretty good question in the 60s. What was it? The hippies. Good question they had. What's happening? That's a good question. What's happening? And sophisticated hippies say, what's really happening, right? What is really going on? What's making things tick? What's making things happen? Why do people feel like they do and think like they think? What is the difference between success and failure? Who has the appetite and who doesn't have the appetite? This whole fascination about life and people and circumstances and society and money and banks and churches and sermons and books and records and life experiences and enterprise and nations and color and races and religion and a whole fascination for this wide panorama of life and life experiences. I'm telling you, if you'll take a new fascinated look at life and what's going on, it will now show up in color and sharpness in your future communications. It'll have a new reach and a new depth. It'll have a new insight, a new excitement. Now, I've got a good experiment for you to try. The next time you're tempted to be frustrated, see if you can turn it into fascination. How to turn frustration into fascination. That's a good skill to try to learn. I'm sitting on the freeway in Los Angeles. My airplane leaves in 45 minutes. The traffic is not moving an inch. I am now fascinated. I'm telling you. Now, it doesn't work every time. I'm willing to admit that. Nothing works every time. But can you imagine the extra value you'll get from a frustrating experience if you just think about this? Can I turn this frustrating experience into something fascinating? I'll learn a lot more from it if I'm fascinated by it than just frustrated by it. So just try that little key. Try to turn frustration into fascination. And in a frustrating experience, if a smile comes across your face, other people will wonder, what's going on? But it'll just be private between you and me. The man taught me how to be fascinated, if possible, in a frustrating situation. Okay, turning frustration into fascination. The extra learning discipline, the extra learning skill. And I think this is part of it. Here's the next key word. This is a big one. Sensitivity. To really communicate well and to touch people in a wide range and from a wide range of experience, you've just got to have felt the experience. It's got to be part of you. Sensitivity training. Being touched by a wide range of human experience, perhaps even beyond your own. Incredible words said about the master teacher, Jesus. It said he was moved. Wow, that's a key word. It said he was moved with compassion. What was happening moved him. It touched him. Another phrase said he was touched. He was moved. He was affected. On more than one occasion, he cried. So part of that human drama of experience, I think, for us to really be able to reach people and touch people with words and ideas and emotion and phrases and sentences loaded with feelings, we've got to go into this area of sensitivity, being touched, being affected by our own lives as well as the lives of other people. Sensitivity. Being touched, being moved. This is part of the heavyweight stuff that starts to show up now in our language and in our communication. I've lived a rather sheltered life all my life, so I've had to really work on this. What do I know about tragedy? I've never had any tragedy. But part of the world is tragic. Part of life is tragic. And if you don't at least try to understand the dark side of life, the tragic side, the extreme sorrow side, your life is left a bit shallow. And sometimes when you live such a sheltered life, you just have to try to go outside of your own small world of sheltered experiences and see if you can't live as someone else might have lived, or at least try to be touched by the experience. Now, you can't really know till you live it. I understand that, but at least you can try. And if you do your homework here in sensitivity for a wider range of experience than your own, I promise you that extra worth will show up in your conversation and in your communication. When I lived in Northern California, I used to go to San Francisco 2-3 times a year, spend a day in the Tenderloin. For a farm boy from Idaho, the Tenderloin in San Francisco, what an experience. And if you just go spend a day, you get to see what we call the other side. And if you just spend a day there and walk the streets where those lonely walk and go eat where they eat and listen to some of those stories, you come away with a whole new sense of the great distance between failure and success. The whole distance between goodness and evil. Between despair and joy. And you come away with more of a sense of value. Because the true values of life come by the contrast. And unless you experience more of the contrast, even the values you consider valuable become a bit shallow if you don't understand the contrast. It's hard to really appreciate winning until you've done some losing. It's hard to appreciate success until you've done some failing. And if you've done some failing, success now becomes a much larger worth and value and commodity if you understand a bit of the other side. So part of this is just deliberately go where experiences beyond your own touch your life to get somewhat of an education as to the contrast of life and the differences. It'll educate your mind and educate your spirit. And sure enough, that extra worth will start showing up in your sentences and your words. And they'll be weightier. They'll be heavier. They'll mean more when you talk to somebody. I met Frank, the bartender in the Tenderloin. Frank is a bartender in this sleazy little bar. You wouldn't believe this place. Frank sees more tragedy in a week than most people see in a lifetime, if you work in one of those places. I'm visiting Frank one day, And Frank and I are talking. Frank says, see that lady sitting over there on the bar stool? And I said, yes. He said, how old do you think she is? I said, she's 45. Frank says, she's 25. I said, wow. He said, that's Cookie. Her name is Cookie. He said, Cookie used to be a go-go dancer back in the go-go days. But then he said Cookie developed some kind of bone disease in her legs and her hips. And he said now she's had all kinds of operations with the bolts and the pins trying to hold her together, and says now she's a cripple and she can hardly walk, so her go-go days are over. And sure enough, Cookie was very crippled. Frank says Cookie also has a little boy, 5 years old, and he's dying of leukemia. So he said Cookie comes several times a week, sits on that bar stool, and plays a little music to try to cheer up her life. And she usually drinks far too much, and gets wasted, and I have to call a taxi to come and take her home. Wow, I thought Cookie. How come her life worked out like that and my life worked out like this? How come I get to travel around the world and Cookie finds it hard to even get home? That kind of exposure, that kind of sensitivity, that kind of study. Now, you can't really know it unless you live there. I understand that. But you can go a great deal into trying to understand a wider range of human experience. And if you will try to let those experiences touch you, let them affect you, let them educate you, let them give you a broader range of emotional wealth and worth, I'm telling you, that extra worth will start showing up in your language, in your words and in your sentences. And you'll be able to touch people that you couldn't touch before. You'll be able to reach people you couldn't reach before you had the experience. Your words will have more of a drawing than they had before just by going through some of these experiences. So I'm asking you to consider the word sensitivity and ask yourself, what could I do and what experiences could I make sure that I engage in that would give me a broader range of understanding of human suffering as well as human joy, of the dilemma as well as the confidence, of the joy as well as the sorrow, of the success as well as the failures of life. And try to gain an understanding in a broader sense, and let that have an effect on your future ability to touch and reach somebody else. Key word, sensitivity.